Welcome to Extra Time, everybody. Act 2 this week. Shep messing with me as always. I'm Jason, the producer. Last week we spoke about potential player signings, and this week the players are flying. Mostly off the rosters, though, as the contractual guarantees start July 1st.
Well, for some of the teams like New York Red Bull, about time. Juan Petrovallo out. John Conway out. Bunakandul in. And Chivas, they've let go Aleko Eskandarian.
So these moves that teams are making, opening up some salary for the transfer window, which starts July 15th, one team in particular that we're hearing about and being asked about is Toronto FC, and it's sort of a buzzword in Toronto when you mention Julian De Guzman is probably the best Canadian player out there right now. Mo said he would be the ideal designated player. Is that something that is realistic at this time? Could he make his way over?
Well, first of all, De Guzman, for me, is one of the greatest players in the world at his position, coming as a deep defensive midfielder for Deportivo. He's got the ability to get forward, to create, to score goals. Right. My sources confirmed for me 100% that last weekend in Los Angeles, De Guzman and his representatives met with Toronto. Toronto made a great designated player offer to him. He's trying to decide. And De Guzman, if you're watching this, Mo Johnston, the Toronto franchise, the fans, that's a great place to be.
And get them to the playoffs. That's what they want. If they did bring him in, what does that do for what might be the best midfield in MLS already? They bring him in, does it become a logjam in the midfield?
Well, that's a pleasant problem for Chris Cummins. He will have a myriad of opportunities in the midfield. De Guzman, we said, is a deep midfielder, but he can play any place. So they already have Sam Cronin, Cole Robinson. They could put Cole Robinson at the back where they could use some help. They could push De Rosario up front. They could put De Guzman as an attacking midfielder. I predicted Toronto was going to the finals this year, so that'll be a pleasant problem if they sign De Guzman.
Your prediction wouldn't have looked very good over this past weekend when Toronto got smacked 3-0 by Real Salt Lake, which brought us to thinking, who are the teams that are maybe getting hot right now through July? Who are the teams that might be on the downswing? Real Salt Lake was definitely one that stuck out to us in terms of on the upswing.
I was concerned for a while about Salt Lake, and Jason Kreis and his team had lost their way, but their key player is Morales. Last year he was unstoppable. This year he struggled because everybody knows who he is. He was being marked, but he's been energized. He's finding space. He's creating goals. He's got a target in Movsisian up front. So all of a sudden, Salt Lake in general, Morales in particular, they're both playing well.
Yeah, they went to that long streak where they just couldn't score goals. Movsisian wasn't finishing. Morales picks up his energy. Movsisian now seems to be picking it up, and now all of a sudden they become this dangerous team who was in the conference final last year and can definitely compete with anyone in the West.
Well, they are going to lose some players like Kyle Beckerman and Will Johnson, but I think they have versatility and depth on the roster. I like the way Grabavoy has played. Robbie Russell, he's interchangeable, so they have some good pieces.
Right, and definitely a good situation for Salt Lake, when you look at their schedule and stuff for the month of July. They should be getting some points and gaining some ground in the West. Now, another team that I definitely think in the West, especially that is hot right now, is Seattle. And we've talked about Freddie Montero heating up, scoring goals, but now it seems the whole team is really picking it up. They're 2-0-2 in their last 4 games. They're scoring goals, and for me, that's what's key. They're scoring goals. They're a team that gets forward. They're more likely to win a game 4-3 than they are to win a game 1-0, which is, I guess an exciting way to watch soccer, right?
Well, I'm feeling good about them as well because I picked Seattle to play Toronto in MLS Cup final.
I think coming together for Shep right now.
I could feel it, but they have, I think, arguably the best goalkeeper in the league in Casey Keller. Defensively, they've been good. Alonso's been a revelation deep in the midfield. But you talked about the triangle. Freddie Montero has been brilliant. Nate Jaqua has been terrific. Freddie Lundberg, when he's in the lineup and playing with those other 2 guys, they are tough to contain.
Yeah, and interesting for Seattle, they're looking at home games against Chicago and Houston. Houston first in the West, so it could be a chance for Seattle to maybe jump into first in the West. One of the teams that we were thinking maybe not looking at the best going into July is Chicago. Now, they still have all their offensive weapons, but they're missing some big parts, and those big parts are John Bush in goal, Gonzalo Segares outside, and Logan Paul's in the middle of the field. And while they still have good defenders, they get Bakary Samari back. are they losing too much going into July and going into big games at Seattle, at New England in Superliga? Is this a time that they're going to struggle?
Yeah, I think it's a tough stretch for Dennis Hamlet, but Dennis Hamlet has a good Chicago Fire team. He's got to manage how he does during the year. They're going to be in the playoffs. It's really about how they're playing in August, September, October. So tough period. I think the biggest challenge will be in goal. Cut his backup goalkeeper and signed a kid named Dykstra. I hope he's not related to Lenny Dykstra.
Yeah, I'd heard good things about Nick Noble, but I guess at this point it was time to move on. For Chicago, the one thing that I guess you can point to the positive, other than them having all their attacking players, is in those Superliga games, they did get to experiment a little. They played Tim Ward at the holding midfielder, and he'll probably, fill in for Logan Paws. So they were able to move things around and see how they'd adjust when Gold Cup came around.
Well, again, for Dennis Hamlet, it's all about managing minutes, managing personnel. He knows the players he's losing. He knows that right now it's a tough stretch, but right. I think they'll come back.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a big weekend coming up, and of course, a first versus second in the East, because I feel like we do that every week. It's great to have it, though. We're going to look at some other Gold Cup action as well. See you then.